first thing I want to say is that if you don't want to use polyfill or poly pellets because of concerns about plastics, which hadn't even occurred to me, and I'm super excited that you guys raised this in the thread, that there is a link at the top of the discussion thread about alternatives that do not involve plastics. So there is going to be a link to that in the description of this video as well. The second thing I want to point out is that when I sewed in my end, that where the body picked up, I just want to point out that I didn't trim it because we're just going to be stuffing this. So I look at ends as being like free stuffing. So that is something to think about, is that you don't actually have to trim your ends on the inside of a toy. All right, so when we stuff something, if we take a big chunk and try to shove it in, what's going to happen is we're going to have big sections, and next to each other, what they get is they get this buildup. See those spaces in between? Whereas if we have lots of little pieces, there's lots less gaps between, just like with my fingers here, compared to like the fists have these big spaces. They also, big chunks of stuffing also tend to be lumpy. So, let's start. We're going to stuff the tip, and then we're going to stuff the hat. I like to stuff the hat a little more lightly maybe than I do the body. This is, it's unusual for me to stuff the entirety of a gnome hat, although in gnome pun intended, I did stuff that hat as well. That one quite lightly. And that one though was sort of built to look like it was floppy and it was sort of tipping over, just the way the hat was worked. But this one I wanted to be something that stood nice and perky. So we're going to start by stuffing here, mostly loosely, and then we're going to stuff most of the body, at least half. This is a DK weight version, and so the amount of pellets that will fit in here is a lot bigger than, it's a greater amount. So we're just going to do it slightly differently with the DK, so the amounts won't be exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by taking a small amount of stuffing and just kind of taking it and inserting it up. Stuffing is more of an art than a science. So there is no 100% right way to do it or 100% wrong way to do it, especially if it makes you happy. I think that's the rule with pretty much everything in life, especially hobbies. If it makes you happy, that's not the wrong way. So I'm taking a small amount and stuffed it up there. In the fingering weight sizes, I found it hard to get the stuffing all the way up. So I took a very narrow piece of stuffing, and what I did was I actually took one of the DPNs, or maybe I tried with the DPN and it went through, and so then what I did is I wrapped it around a chopstick and I just gently placed it up into the narrowest bit and then built on from there. So that might be something that you find you need to do if you're struggling to get a little bit up there. Take a very narrow piece and try your finger, maybe your pinky finger, to try to get it up, or like I said, a chopstick might be just enough. And if you kind of drape it over and just nudge it up in there. So now I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to keep choosing small amounts to stuff. When we choose big amounts, we tend to get gaping and lumpy bits. So I'm just going to stuff away, and you can kind of watch. One of the things I do as I stuff is I continuously kind of use my hands to feel how it is. Is there one section where it's a lot firmer? Because one of the things you can do when you stuff things is if you pull the stuffing apart, it gets loose and fluffier. But if it happens to be much more compact, which you can make it more compact, that's going to produce kind of a different look and feel. So I like to, after I've stuffed a little bit, I go back and I test it with my other hand. As it's getting bigger, my amounts are getting bigger, but I'm also not stuffing downwards, I'm stuffing sideways, so that each bit is just kind of more like adding a layer rather than adding a lot, then it might get gapey. So this amount will then go sort of horizontally across the hat. And then one of the things I do once I'm in there, and it's very difficult to show you what I'm doing, but I've got the stuffing and I'm kind of using my hands horizontally, and I'm using my fingers and I'm kind of pushing it around, or I'll back out and I'll use my thumb like this and my fingers and kind of just stretch it sideways. And by doing that, kind of like this, I get it to fill into all the sides and all the spaces. All right, it's time to add the pellets. So we've got our gnome stuffed from tip to mostly through the body, and I've got space in here for pellets. I've got my fingers kind of looped underneath the DP ends so that I hold that open. Oh, there we go, that's better. So I hold that open, and then I just grab these. I usually do this over the table so that the ones that fall are easy to clean up afterwards. And then because I'm leaning this on the table, I don't have a lot of space, but what you can do is just kind of pull the DP ends up and give them the space for the pellets to keep going in. All right, because of the size of this gnome, I can actually just grab the body and the things will stay open and nice. I don't know if I've ever tried doing that with a fingering weight gnome, but especially because of the way I'm holding it to keep it on camera, I'm just gonna hold it around the body here and just grab some with my hands and dump it in, kind of mush it around, make sure it's going to the edges. We add the pellets because we want weight. They are not the only thing you can do to add weight. Some people buy big washers, like nuts and bolts and washers. Some people put rocks in. Obviously, if you are giving this to a child, I do not encourage you to put anything terribly firm, because kids tend to grab onto the hats and kind of swing things around, and that can get a little dangerous. So we want to put in enough pellets that the weight will help counterbalance the height of the gnome. So I've got my pellets in. I've got a little bit of room still. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some of the fluffy stuffing and I'm going to just kind of cap it off. We don't wanna add so much stuffing at the bottom that we make it something that's gonna tip or that it's rounded. But what you just wanna do is kind of take it and stretch it out across this area so that it acts like a cap, so that as you're doing the last final decreases, those pellets aren't jumping out and trying to drive you crazy. So just put a little bit more. Once you're done all of those, you can then, once you've done all those decreases, I mean, you can then take it and stuff it a little bit more. This is a good time to flip it over and check. If you do this, will your gnome stand? Obviously, with the 4 DPNs adding some stability, you're getting like an additional sense of things, but it can at least give you a sense of whether or not there's even a chance of it feeling like you can knock it over easily. You just want to feel like you've got a little bit of weight in there and that it's going to counterbalance the rest of this height, because this is a nice tall gnome. All right, so finish up your decreases, add a little bit more if you need to. You can also add a little bit more pellets. If it seems like you've under pelleted, you can add a few more pellets and then add a bit more stuffing. You can kind of sandwich it, layer it like that. And that's all there is to stuffing. It's a bit of an art, not so much a science. I hope this helped. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.